It was one of those sweltering summer days when the air feels thick and heavy. The sun blazed overhead while I was home alone with my dad. My mom had gone to visit her sister for the weekend. I recall feeling a mix of excitement about spending time with him and a hint of nervousness. What could possibly happen in this empty house? As the day progressed, my dad seemed to be in a different mood. He was more playful than I remembered. We exchanged jokes, and then he proposed we watch a movie together. "How about something a bit daring?" he suggested with a mischievous grin. I chuckled, thinking he was just being goofy, but a part of me couldn't help but wonder if he was hinting at something else. We settled on a romantic film, the kind filled with tension and passion. During the steamy scenes, I caught my dad stealing glances at me, and my heart raced. Was he actually enjoying this? I tried to concentrate on the movie, but I couldn't shake the feeling that his gaze held a different weight, one that made everything feel new. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. My heart sank. Who could it be? I quickly glanced at my dad, who motioned for me to be quiet as I tiptoed to the door. I could hear his breathing quicken behind me. Peeking through the window, I spotted our neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, standing there with a basket of cookies. I exhaled in relief and opened the door.
Eat.
"I brought some cookies," she said, her warm smile lighting up the room. However, as she stepped inside, I noticed my dad's demeanor shift. He appeared tense, fidgeting slightly. "Oh, thank you, Mrs. Thompson. Just what we needed," he replied, his tone overly cheerful, leaving the air thick with something unspoken. I could see his eyes darting to mine, a blend of longing and uncertainty on his face. "Have you ever thought about what it would be like if Mom weren't here?" he asked, searching my eyes. My heart raced. Was he truly asking what I thought he was? Before I could respond, he leaned in closer. "I know it's wrong, but I can't help how I feel," he whispered. The room buzzed with an electric charge, leaving my mind spinning with confusion and exhilaration. What was happening? Was I imagining this, or was my dad genuinely crossing a line just as I was about to speak? My phone buzzed with a text. It was my mom, saying she'd be home sooner than expected. Panic flashed across my dad's face. "We need to act normal," he said quickly, pulling away. But the moment had already settled heavily between us. As we tried to maintain the facade that everything was fine, I felt the weight of temptation and the thrill of the unknown. Deep down, I knew things had shifted. The air crackled with unexpressed feelings, and every glance shared felt charged with energy. When my mom finally walked in with a bright smile, she seemed blissfully unaware of the tension that had built. "What did you two do while I was gone?" she asked, but all we could muster was nervous laughter. As the days passed, I couldn't shake the memory of what had almost transpired that day. I kept replaying those moments in my mind, the way he looked at me, and the palpable tension between us. Would things ever return to how they were? One evening, while we were all watching TV together, I caught my dad glancing at me again, making my heart race. I held onto a secret that was both thrilling and terrifying. Would we ever discuss what had happened? The suspense lingered in the air, leaving me both curious and anxious. What would happen next? Would this secret remain between us? Or would it somehow bring us closer in a way that could alter everything? Only time would reveal the truth. The weeks that followed that intense day felt surreal, as though an unusual cloud hung over our home, a secret that neither my dad nor I could address. I found myself replaying those moments over and over. The way he had gazed at me, the electric atmosphere, and the confusing mix of emotions swirling around us. One evening, while I was studying in my room, I heard my dad's familiar laughter drifting up from downstairs. Intrigued, I crept to the top of the stairs and peeked down to see him chatting with my mom at the dining table. They seemed so normal, and I felt the weight of our shared secret pressing down on me. Just then, my mom turned and called out, "Hey, do you want to join us for a game?" Her bright smile was contagious, yet my heart was still racing from my earlier thoughts. "Sure," I replied, trying to sound nonchalant as I made my way down the stairs. My dad glanced at me, and for a fleeting moment, our eyes locked. In that instant, there was a flash of understanding that left me breathless as we played. Laughter filled the room, but I noticed my dad was more animated than usual, leaning in closer to me, his arm brushing against mine. Each time our skin connected, a thrill shot through me. Was he trying to reignite that spark we had shared, or was it all in my imagination? Later that night, after my mom went to bed, I found myself wandering into the living room. I had hoped to clear my head, but instead, I found my dad on the couch, a glass of whiskey in hand, staring blankly ahead. "Hey," I said softly, not wanting to disrupt the mood. He looked up, surprised. "Oh, hey. I didn't think anyone would be up." His voice was warm, yet carried an underlying depth. "Can't sleep?" I asked, taking a seat across from him. He sighed and ran a hand through his hair. "Just thinking about some things." He paused, his gaze dropping to the floor. "You remember that day?" My heart raced again.
Yeah, idag.
I tried to keep my voice steady, but the tension was thick. "I shouldn't have brought it up," he said abruptly, his tone serious. "It was a mistake." "Was it?" I asked, surprising myself with my own boldness. "I mean, it felt different." He looked at me, really looked at me. "It did, didn't it?" The air between us felt heavy with unspoken thoughts. Just as I was about to respond, my phone buzzed on the coffee table. I grabbed my phone, hoping to ease the tension with a distraction. It was a message from a friend asking if I wanted to hang out. I hesitated for a moment before replying. "Sure. I'll be there soon." "Going out?" my dad asked, his tone casual, yet I could see a flicker of disappointment in his eyes. "Just for a little while," I replied, standing up to leave. "I'll be back shortly." "Okay," he said, but I sensed a sadness. As I stepped outside, a mix of excitement and guilt washed over me during the walk to my friend's house. It felt like I was leaving something significant behind. Later that evening, after a fun time with my friends, I returned home still buzzing with energy. As I crept into the living room, I found my dad on the couch, absorbed in a book. He looked up and grinned when he saw me. "Hey, how was it?" he asked, putting the book down. "It was great," I replied, settling in beside him. "Did you miss me?" He teased lightly, but the seriousness in his eyes made my heart flutter. "Maybe just a little," I admitted, biting my lip. He chuckled softly, but there was a depth to his laughter that sent butterflies fluttering in my stomach. "I missed you too." Just then, there was a knock at the door, startling both of us. My heart raced as we exchanged glances. "Who could that be?" I asked, but before my dad could answer, he got up to check. As he opened the door, I recognized Mrs. Thompson's cheerful voice as she stood there with another plate of cookies. "Hi there. I thought I'd drop by again," she said brightly. I sighed inwardly, feeling our moment slip away once more. My dad greeted her with a smile, but I noticed his eyes dart back to me, a silent communication passing between us. An urge surged within me to send her away, to reclaim that charged moment we had almost shared. The air was thick with unspoken words. I turned to my dad, emboldened by the moment. "What were we discussing before?" I asked, meeting his gaze. He swallowed hard, looking uncertain. I'm not sure it's wise to talk about it." "Why not?" "It's already hanging there." I pressed, heat flooding my cheeks. He sighed and leaned back against the couch. "All right, but you have to promise me something. Whatever we discuss stays between us. No one can know." "I promise," I said, my heart racing with a mix of thrill and trepidation. "Okay," he said, looking serious. "There's something between us. I can't explain it, but it's real." My breath caught. "I feel it too," I confessed, surprised by my own candor. As he reached for my hand, a spark ignited where our fingers met. "I've wondered about what it would be like if we explored this connection, but it's risky," he said, his voice low and serious. "I understand," I replied, biting my lip, "but what if it could become something more?" He paused for a moment, considering my words, then nodded. "Maybe we should explore it a bit, just to see what it feels like." My heart raced at the thought, and I nodded eagerly. "Okay." But just as the moment hung in the air, my phone buzzed again. It was another message from my mom. "I'm on my way home. Can't wait to see you both." A chill ran down my spine. "Dad, she's on her way back," I said, my voice laced with panic. He quickly let go of my hand, and we both sat up straighter, forcing ourselves to look casual. "We'll talk later," he whispered, urgency in his eyes. A mix of fear and longing enveloped me as I moved toward the front door to prepare for my mom's arrival. The electricity from our previous moment lingered, and I couldn't shake the feeling that our secret was still alive and waiting. When my mom walked in, she greeted us with her usual warmth, completely oblivious to the storm brewing beneath the surface. "What were you two talking about?" she asked, her smile bright and curious. "Nothing much," my dad replied, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. The rest of the evening felt surreal. We shared dinner and chatted about mundane topics, but my mind was racing. What would come next? Would we ever address what had happened? After my mom went to bed that night, I found myself alone in the living room, my heart racing. The air felt charged again, and I wondered if I would ever feel that connection with my dad again. Just as I was about to go to bed, I heard a gentle knock at my door. I opened it to find my dad standing there, looking anxious but resolute. "Can we talk?" he asked quietly. I nodded, my heart pounding as I led him into my room. We perched on the edge of my bed, and the moment felt heavier than ever. "Listen," he said in a low voice. "I know things have been strange, and I don't want to jeopardize our family, but I can't ignore this feeling anymore. I don't want to ruin anything either," I replied, my heart racing, "but I can't help how I feel." He looked at me earnestly, and I could feel the tension crackling between us. "What if we keep this our secret for just a little while longer?" A rush of exhilaration surged through me at the thought. "Okay," I said, my heart racing, but suddenly a loud noise erupted from outside, startling us both. It sounded like a car screeching to a halt, and my heart sank. "Dad, what was that?" I asked, panic creeping back in. "Let's go check it out," he said, rising as we cautiously moved toward the window. My heart was pounding in my chest. I peeked out and saw a familiar figure stumbling out of a car. "Mom," I gasped.
Sister.
She was supposed to be away for the weekend. "What is she doing here?" My dad froze, a look of alarm crossing his face. "What is she doing here?" he muttered, clearly caught off guard. "Hide," I whispered, and we quickly ducked behind the couch. We watched as Aunt Carol entered the house, chatting loudly and dragging in her bags.
Surprise.
"I couldn't wait to see you all," she exclaimed. My stomach dropped as the realization hit us. We were trapped. "What are we going to do?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. My dad glanced at me, his eyes filled with tension. "We'll have to act normal. Just play it cool." We both attempted to breathe steadily as Aunt Carol bustled around, completely unaware of the secret tension simmering between us as she continued her chatter. The weight of our unspoken words hung heavily in the air. Finally, Aunt Carol moved to the kitchen to put away her bags, offering us a brief moment of respite. "Do you think she'll find out?" I asked my dad, my heart racing. "I hope not," he replied quietly, "but we'll have to be cautious." Just then, Aunt Carol reappeared, a plate of cookies in hand. "You two look so serious. What's the discussion?" Aunt Carol interjected, her cheerful demeanor cutting through the tension. My dad quickly masked his expression with a smile. "Just reminiscing about some old times," he replied smoothly. "Oh, good," she exclaimed, plopping down beside us. "I love it when you two share stories. You make such a great team." I felt a mix of irritation and disbelief. How could she not notice the atmosphere between us? The evening passed with small talk, but every accidental brush of my dad's arm sent jolts of electricity through me. It was infuriating to hide our secret while all I wanted was to explore the feelings simmering beneath the surface. Eventually, Aunt Carol excused herself to get settled, and my dad turned to me, his expression urgent. "We need to talk," he whispered, casting a glance toward the kitchen. I nodded, and we slipped away to my room, shutting the door behind us. "What if she discovers us?" I asked, anxiety creeping into my voice. "She won't," he reassured me, determination glinting in his eyes. But we can't keep living in this limbo. It's not sustainable. My heart raced as I nodded in agreement. What should we do? I pressed. Let's take it slow. Just keep everything between us for now, he said firmly. Okay, I replied, a mix of excitement and trepidation swelling within me. Just as we were about to sit down, there was a loud knock at the door, followed by Aunt Carol's voice. Hey, you two. Everything okay in there? We froze, panic flashing between us. Yeah, just a minute, I called out, trying to maintain my composure. Okay. Just checking, she replied, her footsteps echoing down the hallway. We both exhaled a sigh of relief, but the air was still thick with tension. This is going to get complicated, I murmured. Yeah, but we'll figure it out, my dad replied, his gaze locked onto mine. I trust you, I whispered, vulnerability washing over me as we sat close. Our moment was abruptly interrupted when Aunt Carol popped her head into the room, grinning brightly. Are you guys ready for movie night? She asked cheerfully. I felt a rush of frustration but managed to keep a smile on my face. Sure, let's do it, I replied, hiding my disappointment. We joined Aunt Carol in the living room, but as the movie played, I couldn't help but steal glances at my dad. The tension between us crackled like electricity, and I knew we were both lost in our thoughts. As the credits rolled, Aunt Carol stifled a yawn. I'm off to bed, she announced. You two should get some rest too. Good night, we chorused, and once she disappeared down the hall, my heart raced with anticipation. Now what? I asked, breath catching in my throat. We wait for the right moment, he said, his eyes intense. But just as I turned to leave, Aunt Carol peeked back in. Everything all right? She asked, a hint of suspicion in her gaze. Yeah, we're fine, I shot back, my heart pounding. After she left, I whispered. What's our plan? Stay calm, he replied. We'll work it out. The following days felt like a tightrope act. One afternoon, while Aunt Carol was out, I found my dad sitting at the kitchen table. Dad, we need to talk, I said, my voice unsteady. He set down his newspaper, concern etched on his face. What about? He asked, leaning in. About us, I said, my heart racing. I can't stop thinking about what we've felt. Neither can I, he admitted, moving closer. But Aunt Carol, maybe we should take a risk. Just a small one, I suggested, breath quickening. He hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Okay, just a kiss. Just as our lips were about to meet, Aunt Carol's voice rang out from the door. Hey, are you two okay out here? Panic surged through us, and we sprang apart. Yeah, we're fine, I called, my heart racing. Once she left, I turned to my dad, urgency flooding my thoughts. We can't keep hiding this. He nodded, determination clear in his eyes. Then let's tell her. My heart thumped loudly as we returned inside. Aunt Carol, we need to talk, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. What about? She asked, her brow furrowing with concern. About our feelings, I replied, my breath catching. Her eyes widened in surprise. Wait, you mean? Yes, my dad confirmed. We want to explore this, but we don't want to hurt you. The silence that followed was thick with tension as she processed the revelation. I never expected this, she finally said. I know, I added, desperation creeping into my voice. But it's tearing us apart. I need some time to think, she said, her voice shaking as she turned away. What have we done? I whispered to my dad, dread washing over me. He took a deep breath. We've opened a door that can't be closed now. We must face whatever comes next. In that moment, I realized that our decision had irrevocably altered everything.